I'm joined now by NBC News Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor and Washington Post national political reporter who covers the intersection of abortion access, policy, and politics. It's Carolyn Kitchener. Yamiche, let me start here with this sort of what is justice preparing for? What is the most likely scenario they think is coming?
At this hour, it doesn't feel like there's anyone who really can say what the scenario will be. What we know is that it's probably going to be it's at least coming down to the idea that it's more complex of a case than all of us thought it would be, only because of this extension. And talking to experts, you realize that this case, if it was easy, it would have been decided in the first deadline and not a new deadline being sent. That being said,
well, don't we also have the other district court decision from Washington State, which probably has created even more complications to their rulemaking.
Exactly. I will say that there is reporting that you see states, universities, pharmacies stockpiling already this abortion pill. And by the way, we should add that there's a generic maker of the mifepristone who is suing to try to stop the FDA from saying that their approval would be taken away with all of this. So there are a myriad number of court issues going on here. And the Justice Department, of course, it's in some ways preparing for whatever the Supreme Court decides. They've made their cases. They've said that they believe the FDA is, at the end of the day, the place where this should be approved, and that this would have sweeping implications if this drug, if the approval was taken away, or even if it was curtailed and the restrictions were curtailed, because we've never had a case where the FDA has been told, well, this drug that you say is scientifically safe, courts disagree with you, so we're going to take this drug off the market.
Caroline, I want to get to the point. You know, the plaintiffs have not actually gone after the pill that actually induces the abortion, but they're actually going after the part of the regimen that actually eases the pain and side effects of the initial drug to women. So they're taking away a drug that essentially brings more pain and suffering to a woman that has medicated abortion. Is that the point?
I mean, it's hard to say, why they're doing any of this. But, I do think it's important to talk about that second drug in the regimen, misoprostol. I think a lot of people don't realize that there are two drugs that go into a medication abortion. And in fact, throughout much of the world, misoprostol is used alone to terminate pregnancies. And that is the one that they're not going after. So, even if the courts were to halt distribution and, basically take mifepristone off the market, there still would be this other option. But taken alone, it is a lot more painful. There's more cramping. There's more bleeding. It's just a more difficult experience for patients.
And Carolyn, why haven't they gone after the drug itself? Is it because that other drug is also used to treat ulcers?
Yeah, I mean, misoprostol has been around a lot longer. It was, originally approved for stomach ulcers. And we don't know. A lot of abortion rights activists are saying they're just starting with mifepristone and then they could go to misoprostol next. That's not likely to happen, I think, anytime super soon. To the extent that misoprostol would be affected, it would be through the mail. If they rule in a particular way, then any abortion pill could be, prevented from being sent through the mail, misoprostol or mifepristone.
Yamiche, you were referencing it, and there have been stories about how states like Washington State and California are stockpiling mifepristone. Are those governors thinking about simply ignoring a court ruling, if it's a court ruling that tries to essentially limit or even take mifepristone off the market?
I'm going to think that the Democratic governors are probably taking a little bit of their hints from the White House. And the White House has said they're going to go with whatever the legal standing is and they're going to follow the law. That being said, these governors are, and these states and universities and pharmacies and women and all sorts of people that are stockpiling, they're in some ways getting ready for the fact that they might have to follow rules that they don't agree with. So I don't think the idea is that these governors would say, I'm going to ignore the Supreme Court, I'm going to ignore the court rulings, because we already saw the HHS secretary get into a little bit of a tizzy 2 weeks ago, a week ago, when he was somewhat suggesting that could be the case, and the White House came out and said, absolutely not, we will follow whatever the courts rule.
Carolyn, do you have an idea of how, let's say the scenario has the Supreme Court allowing the Fifth Circuit stay to go into effect, which would essentially eliminate mifepristone distribution via the mail. What's enforcement look like for that?
Oh, man, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it would very effectively shut down a lot of these online abortion pill providers that have cropped up since coronavirus, the FDA lifted these restrictions and allowed abortion pills to be sent through the mail. Those kinds of providers, which are doing a lot of work right now, especially in the wake of Dobbs, they would be shut down. There's not really a way around that. That would be a very, I think, significant blow to access right away.
Let me do a quick political aspect to this. Yamiche, Susan B. Anthony, they came out and basically criticized Donald Trump for not taking a hardline stance on a national standard. And they have set the marker at 15 weeks as a national standard. That doesn't, it's an interesting, I'm still trying to figure out, I think they're trying to figure out what their official pro-life position should be. And that's what they're trying to put out as a marker there. Is the party ready for that? Is 15 weeks satisfactory?
This is where I think the confusion and the splintering of the Republican Party is fascinating on this issue, because you have a number of different Republicans who are saying all sorts of different things, chief among them former President Donald Trump, who, of course, had the Supreme Court majority to get Roe v. Wade overturned. The other thing that he was saying is we want to leave this issue of abortion to the states. That's what the Supreme Court said last year. But, of course, as soon as conservatives and a lot of conservative groups got that win, they said, well, actually, what we really want is abortion to stop completely. So you have some Republicans and some people in this activist group who are saying we want a federal and national abortion ban, and we don't want to leave this to the states. So it's a very interesting thing. And, of course, look where we are. A year later, we're back at the Supreme Court with another case. So as much as they wanted to say, oh, yeah, this issue will go to the states, it's obviously not one that can only be resolved in the states.
Carolyn, do you get the sense that SBA has the juice to be the enforcer of abortion politics in the GOP?
They certainly do wield a lot of power. In January, Ron DeSantis met with the president of SBA. She's very influential. She meets with a lot of the governors and a lot of the people that are considering runs for president. And I do think it's a really good question, though. I mean, it's very clear again and again and again in elections that voters in a general election don't seem to want this. But I do think a lot of these Republican candidates are thinking about the primary. Yeah. What Marjorie Dannenfelser of Susan B. Anthony list is saying is, you can't make it out of a primary if, you're, quote unquote, weak on abortion nationally.
Well, look, I mean, what we all forget is most Republican candidates never have to actually face a competitive general election. Most Republican office holders never have to face an actual competitive. I think they're just not wired for it, and that may be why they're in this catch-22 that they found themselves in. Carolyn Kitchener of the Washington Post, Yamiche Alcindor on Team NBC. Thank you both.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.